Segment 3, Golden Black Live. And, it's fun for me, even though he's younger than I am. It's fun to have heroes. And Ernie Schramayr on October the 20th, I think it was 1988, was heroic. And it ties into Purdue's game tomorrow at the Shoe, because this guy that you're looking at had more to do. I mean, there were other guys that were big, but Ernie Schramayr was a household word in the college football world after the Boilermakers' upset win over Ohio State, catching 13 passes in that game from Brian Fox as Purdue beat Ohio State 31-26 back in 1988. Ernie, welcome to Golden Black Live in segment 3. That was a magical day, and I'm sure in your life, in your mind's eye, that still has a lot of memories for you.
It's that day was the perfect example that there's a few times in your life when you have this state that you call flow, where you're in flow. The week before, I think was the first time I had kind of a breakout game was against Minnesota.
Yeah,
I think MVP that game, and then there was a couple of weeks where I had been coming in and out of the backfield with Scott Nelson. We were alternating, but so I was leading up to that. But the day at Ohio State, it literally felt like I was playing against children. Like I would look across, I'd get to the huddle, Brian would call a play which was going to me, and it was no question that the guy was not going to be, whoever I was against was not going to be able to cover me. And it just felt like everything had already happened before it happened. It was really a neat feeling, as you can imagine.
13 receptions, 106 yards, 2 second half touchdowns. And to me, it always seemed like in my memory, it was a dump pass. It was a 6-yard pass over the middle. You found a gap in the middle, and that seemed to be it. What was your recollection of what were they doing defensively that made you so open and be able to tear into a seam of their Buckeyes defense under Coach John Cooper?
From what I remember, you're pretty much correct. It was a lot of dumps. It was short. It was either in the flat or it was over the middle. They were playing off for whatever reason and didn't adjust. So it was the button hook kind of a route, hard at the linebacker turn. He'd be giving me a cushion every time. Yeah, which was just the dump, and it just worked and worked. And some of them we broke a little longer, 15, 12 yards. Most of them were in the 8, 7, 9 range, but it just worked. The second one, which was going into the closed end of the second touchdown, going into the closed end of the stadium. The thing I remember about that is that we couldn't hear anything, and we actually had to stop a couple of times. And Brian was playing like a veteran, like incredible. But there was one point, I was a senior, where he actually looked at me and was kind of like freaking out a little bit. And I remember seeing it on the replay after, and I'd look at him and say, calm down. And let's go to hand signals. We couldn't hear a thing. We stopped, we regrouped, we stopped again, and it was unbelievable. It was cut through the middle. They backed off. It was wide open and just seemed to work. The game plan was perfect that day. That was
a 17-year-old Brian Fox, amazingly, right? And incredible that he was that young and only year at Purdue, transferred out of Purdue, went to Florida after that, Florida guy. But, an amazing experience to beat Ohio State. And I remember the first play of that game, I think Carlos Snow runs first set of downs, runs 50 yards for a touchdown, and looked like it was going to be an OSU romp. That you guys gathered it together and really made it a football game. And a long touchdown pass to Lance Scheib in the second quarter kind of got you going. But then it was Ernie Schramayr show in the second half. I don't know if all of your 13 catches were in the second half, but most of them were.
The funny thing is, I before getting to Purdue, I was I was a running back in Quebec. I played junior football. I had several rushing records at several different levels. I broke the all-time yard, but I don't think I caught more than a couple, maybe 5 passes in a season, maybe. And so I was never a receiver, but Purdue, the cradle of quarterbacks, was all about receiving. So it was a matter of transitioning to that other role. And so that was neat. I enjoyed that a lot.
Well, you had a fascinating career at Purdue because you started in '85 as a punter. And did that. Then, of course, Sean McCarthy came in after that. And Sean was a terrific talent and ended up getting an opportunity in the NFL to do some of that as well. First, getting to coming to Purdue, and Purdue had a Canadian invasion. Willard Wells and others recruited several of your guys. We talked to Tony Visco, who was one of Purdue's all-time leading tacklers. Bill Hitchcock, who played in the NFL. Denny Karnopoulos, others. Tell me about when you first heard about Purdue, and of course you're a Montreal area guy, but that opportunity to come here.
So I'll be honest, I had no idea what Purdue was. I never heard of. Except on my street, on the circle that I lived on, the block on Place du Bois, there was one dad, an older dad, a kid's dad, who had Purdue, either a bumper sticker or a shirt or something. Turns out he was an engineer that went to Purdue, but I'm talking about just seeing it in passing. So when I was getting recruited, I talked to Syracuse, Miami, Ohio, but a few different schools, but Purdue was really, really interested. And what I found out later on was a player that I grew up with in Montreal and Quebec was Alonzo Highsmith. Yeah. Who went to the Hurricanes and then to the NFL. His dad was playing, Wally Highsmith was playing for the Montreal Alouettes at the time. Yeah. So we were little kids. His dad was our coach. And Alonzo was in Montreal until he was about 15, I believe. Yeah. And then went to Florida. And then the rest is history. But from what I understand, when Willard was recruiting at Christopher Columbus High School in Florida, where Alonzo was, that Wally told him he's got to come up and check me out, go up to Quebec and this kid. Because it was like Alonzo and me all the way up. He went on there, and then I got, then at the time I was the all-star punter along with the running back in Quebec. Purdue at the time, from what I remember, the one kicker graduated and one failed out of school. They needed somebody to fill in. So I was very clear that I wanted to be a running back. Yeah. So, but they knew that I could punt, so they brought me in the first year to be the punter, and that was pretty. It was pretty intense. The first game was at Pitt University. Yeah. They just finished, right? Yeah, in '85, and they were honoring Tony Dorsett and Dan Marino and all this. So my first time on the field, like in front of 60,000 people, whatever, we were punting or kicking from, I think the line of scrimmage was like at our 2 or 3 yard line. Yeah. So jogging onto the field to kick out of the back of the end zone without the 15 yards. That was the first play I got on. And
Metal, and I remember that game on ESPN on August 31st game. One that was a tough loss to have to deal with, but I do remember you being a punter and wearing number 16, and then ultimately you switched you have both of your jerseys back. I see back right shoulder. The jersey, that was the jersey from the Indiana game, right, in '86, right, when you wore the gold jerseys, and beat Indiana on that day, and Coach Leon Burtnett's last game. Talk about those memories of just other things that stood out at you at your Purdue experience, and what that was for you. Arriving in '85 at the beginning, I remember being incredibly homesick, and I talked to my son and the kids now. Teenagers, I mean, no cell phone, no email, none of that stuff, obviously. But also, I remember I would call home once a week on Thursday after 11 because it was cheap, and then it'd be a real fast. Yeah. So I just remember being really, really homesick. It was a very, very different experience being in Lafayette versus being in Montreal, Quebec. Yeah. My best friend he went to McGill University, and they won the national championship that year. So, I'm missing all this stuff. But once settling into campus, whenever he showed up, it was just it's an amazing experience, and how you kind of evolve and grow and fall into the rhythm and the pattern of all that. It was really fun. The one thing that stands out of my mind that it's really weird when I talk to people about now, that they really look at me, really? Like in 4 years of traveling to Washington and Notre Dame and Michigan, all these amazing places, never saw one campus, never even saw an airport. It was flying in on the charter, landing on the tarmac, police escort to the stadium, to the hotel, to the stadium, back to the airport, and then back to campus. So, because people are asking me, a lot of Notre Dame fans around here, what was it like? And I said, we saw the stadium. I remember the locker room, the visitors' locker room was really stuff ripping, and it was not that nice, but that's a weird thing, because I went on to play in the CFL, and then the first road trip we fly out to Vancouver,
and we get a per diem, and we'll see you guys tomorrow, and then you're free to roam. So that was a very different experience. That was hard at the time. It just seems normal, but looking back, I go, man, I wish we could have seen a little bit more. You know, I had a little bit more freedom.
Yeah, interesting, because you did play in some great venues. Yeah, you got a chance to go out to Seattle and play Washington, and then in 1987, your junior year. So and of course Notre Dame, but you had your moment of sun. You can always live that. You're part of the last team to beat Ohio State in the horseshoe, and that's an amazing accomplishment. Are you able to watch much Purdue football? And if so, what have you had a chance to see a little bit what's going on this season, which has been a good one so far?
I get text messages every week from Dwayne O'Connor, and Chris
Right,
Burns, and Chris Burns, and this week from Brad Davis, and I hear from them. They've messaged me and sent me little video clips. Purdue has not been on that this year. They've been on a little bit more. The Purdue game was on the Notre Dame game was on, the Michigan State game was on, and the Iowa game. So I saw 3 games this year, but historically we don't get that many. You need to get a special college football package on your team, but more so if they're in a bowl game around holidays. But during the regular, for whatever reason, they've been on 3 times this year that I've been able to see.
Well, I hope you can tune in tomorrow when the Boilermakers. I think it's on ABC in the States, and another.
If it's on ABC, I'll get it here. So that's good.
Yeah, so you might get a chance to, hopefully, if you're a Purdue fan, to watch history repeat itself. All right, tell me a little bit about Ernie Schramayr Fitness, and you've kind of turned that, from what I can tell, into it's a lifestyle. It's a way of living, and you and your family have certainly lived that. Tell us a little bit about that and your family as well.
Well, when I was at Purdue, my first 2 years, I was in the supervision program, which is a business track. I switched to health education because it really seemed to speak to me more. So when I graduated, I went to play in the CFL. I played 5 years in Hamilton and in Ottawa. And in my last couple of years, I started working as a personal trainer, and my goal was to get into corporate fitness, which I'm mentoring in Lafayette at the Subaru Isuzu plant. I was doing some of that there. Mm-hmm. You never know where you're going to end up. So when I was pursuing that, I ended up with a one person client, as a personal training client, which was kind of a new thing at the time back then. So I ended up meeting and hooking up with a doctor who had a clinic which specializes in arts-related injuries. It's the Musicians Clinics of Canada. So it's musicians who have overuse injuries, repetitive strains, or who had been in accidents. So I became the post-rehab referral source, the bridge between rehab and healthcare and full-on fitness. So right from the very beginning, my focus has been on medical exercise. Yeah. So I don't do performance training. I mean, I can do it, but it's not what my specialty is. Medical exercise, helping people manage medical conditions with exercise. So for about 20 years, I had a company, was a physical location called All Canadian Fitness. Yeah. I had over the years 25 trainers who I contracted. In 2013, I transitioned back to being a sole proprietor and working on my own as Ernie Schramayr Fitness. I've been doing a lot of media. I had a radio show for years. I was part of a monthly television broadcast. For years now, I'm a weekly columnist in the Hamilton Spectator newspaper. It's called Fitness Solutions is my column. Yeah. So I'm in Hamilton here. When I retired from playing with the Tiger Cats, Hamilton Tiger Cats, I had met my wife here. I started my business here. So I ended up settling here, and have 2 kids now. My son is going to be 18 in December. My daughter is going to be 21 next week. Next week. So she's training as a social worker, and my son wants to be a trainer. He wants to be a trainer. So he just did his kinesiology exam the other night, and he just had his last football game in high school last week and had 2 touchdowns. And he's a receiver, completely different body type from me. Yeah. Really hard working kid, but he's tall and lean and lanky. And so that's, and my wife was her specialty was in graphic design when I first met her. She's not working in that field anymore, but that's what we're doing here. Ernie Schramayr was a 5'9" bowling ball, a physical specimen, but he was
tough mind. You were not the typical long, lean punter either. I mean, that was. Did you kick when you obviously kicked growing up a lot? I mean, did you put more of your focus? Because I mean, I know you wanted to come to Purdue as a running back, but you also, obviously punted your freshman year.
Yeah,
so.
I didn't. I was never a kicker. I was always a punter. I don't know why. I'd be when we were little kids, I'd be the kind of guy who could do a bit of everything. I played every sport. So I worked on it a lot. The big challenge was when I got recruited was that the football is a different shape and size a little bit. So Coach Wells sent me 10 American balls, which I pumped up and used all summer, before I came to Purdue. From what I remember, I was at a pace. There's a kind of a bittersweet thing that really still bothers me 30, 40, whatever, 5 years later. Is my freshman year, I was on pace to have the highest, the longest punting average maybe ever at Purdue, or since the 30s, something like that. At about the 6th game, they decided they changed the punt formation and they changed the way that we lined up. So we overloaded one side. We brought me over behind the overloads and moved me up to 12 yards. So instead of catching the ball and going step, step, kick, I would start with 1 foot back and catch it and just 1 step kick. So the momentum is, so it completely changed the style of punting. So if I was averaging 46 or something like that, it was now averaging 38, 39. And it was for placement and position. And we would have Woodson on one side and Dishman on the other. And the point was, pretty good. The point was to hang it really high, let them come under it. But it meant it cost about 8 or more yards off the length of the punt. So that kind of bothered me. I didn't like punting like that. But anyway, regardless, I do remember Woodson catching a couple inside the 5-yard line. So that's a nice thing.
You were around some talented guys, especially in the 85, 86 years. Jim Everett, obviously Rod Woodson, Chris Dishman, Kevin Sumlin, who's who of Purdue football players, of which you belong, because your claim to fame holds a lot of memories for a lot of people. So Ernie, thank you so much for. Go ahead. I was going
to say, it was the neat. One of the neat things on that specific day against Ohio State, was on the defensive line, looking right across from me every time I lined up, was a guy that I played with growing up in Montreal, and he got recruited to Ohio State. That's Derek McCready. And he was a down lineman, and he was looking at, once we started rolling and I was up to 8, 9 catches, he was looking across at me like, what are you doing? And then they had and then I ended up playing. I was a teammate of Sreko Zizakovic, who was a linebacker, a defensive end for Ohio State as well. And Sonny Gordon, was one of their DBs. He ended up in Hamilton. Was a teammate of mine as well.
And you always had a little bit of bragging rights on that front. You could always say. You got him on that day, and in your 4 appearances against Ohio State, your team played them 4 years. You got him your senior year. You almost got him your junior year in '87, and that was in West Lafayette as well. But a very memorable day that Purdue fans hope that history repeats itself tomorrow when Purdue and Ohio State take on that. Ernie, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. We're going to do this again because you have a very interesting perspective. We want to thank our sponsors and Triple X. By the way, you've been to Triple X, right? You tell us your story there about or at least the ones you can tell me about your.
It was usually late. It was usually late at night, as you can imagine. But it's the first time I ever heard of this thing called biscuits and gravy.
Yeah, there you go.
The heck is that? And then had a plate, and that has become a lifelong. If somebody says, "What's the one thing that you want to cheat with that it's not good for you, but man, you got to have it." It's a biscuits and gravy from the Triple X.
All right, we got to get you back here in West Lafayette to do that before long. We also want to thank Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day, State HDI tonight, and State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. I want to also thank the good folks at WLFI Gordon Jackson and Company for making this happen today. Our guest, Terry Johnson, Purdue men's basketball. They had the big game tonight against Indiana State. And of course, Brian Newbert and Tom Dienhart to breaking down Purdue's big game. Ernie's guaranteeing a Purdue win tomorrow, right? So why not? Yeah,
Of course.
and we broke all that down. It's going to be an interesting game tomorrow in at the Shoe as Purdue takes on Ohio State at 3:30. Have a great week, everybody. We'll look forward to next week's show. It'll be leading into that game at Wrigley Field when Purdue plays Northwestern. We'll be previewing that next week on Golden Black Live.